In the grand scheme of the Galactic Confederation, peace talks were supposed to be boring. That was kind of the point. Boring meant predictable. Predictable meant safe. Safe meant everybody got to keep their various anatomical appendages attached to their bodies where they belonged. Admiral Krixna of the Zolaxian Diplomatic Corps had supervised exactly 247 peace negotiations in her distinguished career. Her six-tentacled frame had stood tall through territorial disputes between the methane-breathing Quibbins and the crystalline Vex. She'd mediated trade agreements between the hive-minded Krall and the fiercely individualistic Paxtons. She'd even once prevented nuclear war by convincing the Torgal Republic that the Mixian Empire's ambassador had not, in fact, insulted their spawning rituals but had merely suffered from an unfortunately timed facial spasm. But this was different. I don't care if the Crystonians have been fighting the Durax for 3 centuries. Krixna gurgled into her communication device, all 6 eyes blinking in sequence to indicate extreme stress. Find me a solution that doesn't involve planetary annihilation. Her assistant, Glorb, a gelatinous being who had the unfortunate habit of leaving slime trails on important documents, wobbled nervously. Admiral, we've tried everything in the diplomatic handbook. The Crystonians refuse to acknowledge the Durax as sentient, and the Durax have already composed victory songs about the extinction of all Crystonians. They've even set them to catchy tunes. Krixna slumped over her hovering desk, her normally vibrant purple skin fading to a dull lavender. This conflict has destabilized 3 sectors. If we don't find a solution, the Galactic Council will intervene directly. She shuddered, her tentacles curling tightly against her torso. You know what that means. Bureaucracy, Glorb whispered, a small bubble of terror forming at his crown. Exactly. Forms. In triplicate. With the old-style quantum signatures. Krixna's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. The kind that give you temporal displacement if you make a mistake. Glorb oozed backward slightly. We need a miracle, Admiral. Krixna's central eyes narrowed thoughtfully. No. What we need is something neither side expects. Something so unexpected that they'll be too surprised to continue their conflict. Like what? We've tried neutral mediators from 57 different species. We need something unpredictable. Something that will shock both sides into cooperating just to protect themselves from the alternative. Her tentacle reached for the secure database terminal. Computer, show me a list of sentient species not currently affiliated with the Galactic Confederation. The holographic display flickered, scrolling through obscure species from the galactic fringe. Krixna scrolled past the gaseous wefts, too easily ignited in tense situations, the telepathic ghoul, ethical concerns about privacy, and the time-dilated Spexians, who took 50 years to form a single sentence. Then she saw it, a small, insignificant planet on the edge of a spiral arm. The inhabitants called it Earth. Computer, give me a brief on these humans. What followed was a security brief that made all 6 of Krixna's hearts skip simultaneously. Perfect, she whispered, a dangerous gleam in her eyes. Glorb, contact the humans. We need one of their diplomats. Immediately. Glorb quivered. But, Admiral, if this report is accurate, they're exactly what we need. Krixna's skin brightened to a confident violet. When conventional diplomacy fails, you don't need another diplomat. You need a threat. 3 weeks later, Krixna stood in the Confederation's grand spaceport, nervously adjusting her formal tentacle wraps. The human ship had just docked, and according to protocol, she should be feeling optimistic about this new diplomatic avenue. Instead, she was desperately trying to remember if her species' life insurance policies covered death by diplomatic innovation. Admiral, Glorb oozed up beside her. The human representative has arrived. Excellent, Krixna lied, wondering if it was too late to request a transfer to waste management on Sector 9's asteroid mines. The airlock hissed open, and Krixna steeled herself to meet the legendary human. Based on the security briefs, she expected a terrifying creature perhaps 8 feet tall with razor-sharp claws and acidic saliva. Instead, out walked, well, something disappointingly ordinary. The human stood on 2 legs like many species, had only 2 arms ending in primitive 5-digit manipulators, and possessed a single head with a bizarrely flat face. At about 5'10", Commander Thomas Jenkins was downright underwhelming. "Heya," the human said, extending one of its manipulators. "Commander Jenkins, Earth Diplomatic Corps. Call me Tom." Krixna hesitantly wrapped a tentacle around the offered appendage. "Admiral Krixna, Galactic Confederation. On behalf of our governing body, I welcome you to Celestial Station Alpha." Jenkins grinned, revealing flat, obviously inefficient teeth. "Nice digs. Got any coffee around here? The freezer on my ship broke, and I've been on synthetic caffeine for 2 weeks. Tastes like fermented socks." Krixna blinked in confusion. "I don't know what coffee is, but our nutritional synthesizers can replicate most molecular compounds." "Good enough for me." Jenkins hoisted a small bag over his shoulder. "So, where's this big peace conference?" The brief said something about warring species and centuries of conflict. Sounds like Tuesday back home. As they made their way through the station, other diplomats stopped and stared. Some backed away. Others activated personal shielding devices. One Moloshian diplomat actually molted in fear, leaving behind a perfectly shaped exoskeleton as it fled. Jenkins frowned. "Did I forget to put on deodorant or something?" "Ah, no," Krixna said delicately. "It's just that humans have a certain reputation in galactic circles." "We do. Since when? We've only had faster-than-light travel for like 50 years. Half the galaxy doesn't even know we exist." A small diplomatic delegation from Proxima Centauri skittered past, their eye stalks rigid with terror. "Apparently," Krixna said dryly, "word travels fast." When they reached the diplomatic quarters, Krixna's communication device buzzed. She excused herself to answer it in the corridor. "Have you lost your mind?" The holographic face of High Chancellor Vox filled her vision, his 12 nostrils flaring in sequence. "A human? At a peace conference?" "With respect, Chancellor," Krixna replied calmly, "conventional approaches have failed. We need someone unconventional." "Unconventional? That's like saying supernovas are slightly warm. Do you know what humans are capable of?" "I've read the reports." "Reports don't capture it. They drink poison for enjoyment. They expose themselves to radiation for cosmetic purposes. Their recreation involves deliberately falling down frozen mountains. They heal from injuries that would kill any reasonable species. And their history is exactly why I chose them," Krixna interjected. "Chancellor, both the Crestonians and Durax believe they're the most fearsome species in the galaxy. They need to be recalibrated." Vox's hologram sputtered. "This is madness. If this fails, we face exactly the same outcome as if we'd done nothing. At least this way we have a chance." The Chancellor's image flickered as he sighed. "Very well, but keep that human contained. And for the love of all celestial bodies, don't let it get hungry." When Krixna returned, she found Jenkins examining a decorative plasma sculpture with disturbing intensity. "So this is basically contained lightning, right?" he asked, poking the force field. "Please don't touch that," Krixna said quickly. "It's hot enough to vaporize carbon-based life." Jenkins pulled his hand back. "Cool. Hey, about this peace conference, what exactly am I supposed to do? The brief was pretty vague. Krixna hesitated. You're here to present an alternative perspective. Uh-huh. And why did that praying mantis-looking dude in the hall just call me the destroyer in what I'm pretty sure was a religious context? Before Krixna could formulate a suitably vague response, her device pinged. Ah, the delegations are arriving. We should proceed to the Grand Convocation Chamber. As they walked, Jenkins looked around curiously. So what's the deal with these warring species anyway? The Crestonians and Durax have been locked in conflict for over 3 centuries, Krixna explained. It began as a territorial dispute over a single moon, but has since expanded to encompass 12 star systems. 300 years over a moon. That's dedication to holding a grudge. The original cause hardly matters anymore. Now they fight because fighting is all they remember. Krixna's tentacles drooped slightly. Millions have died. Entire ecosystems destroyed. And still, neither side will yield. Jenkins whistled. Sounds like they need more than a negotiator. They need a reality check. Krixna's skin rippled with anticipation. Precisely, Commander. Precisely. The Grand Convocation Chamber was designed to inspire awe, with its transparent ceiling revealing the swirling nebula beyond and walls embedded with luminescent minerals from 1,000 worlds. Normally it worked. Today, however, the chamber was filled with tension thick enough to cut with a ceremonial Durax battle cleaver which, incidentally, General Vrax had insisted on bringing to the peace talks for cultural purposes. I will not sit across from these gelatinous abominations, thundered General Vrax, his exoskeleton clicking with barely contained rage. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, the insectoid Durax general dominated his side of the chamber. His compound eyes reflected the light in fractured patterns, and the ceremonial battle scars etched into his carapace glowed an angry red. From the opposite side, Ambassador Quinn of the Crestonians rippled indignantly, her translucent body changing from peaceful blue to irritated orange. We find your solid state equally revolting, General. The universe clearly intended consciousness to flow freely, not be trapped in rigid forms. Between them, Duke Porridge of the Neutral Systems adjusted his 17 decorative sashes and sighed dramatically. A member of the aristocratic Flubovians, Porridge resembled nothing so much as a sentient collection of purple bubbles with extraordinarily good posture. If we could please maintain decorum, he drawled, his bubbles quivering with practiced indifference. Some of us have gala events to attend later. Krixna cleared her throat, or rather, vibrated her speech membranes in the Zolaxian equivalent. Esteemed representatives, before we begin formal negotiations, I would like to introduce a special mediator who brings a unique perspective to our talks. The chamber doors slid open and Commander Jenkins strolled in, sipping from a container of what the station synthesizer had approximated as coffee. Judging by his expression, the approximation was poor. The reaction was immediate. General Vrax's antennae straightened in alarm. Ambassador Quinn solidified slightly a sign of extreme distress in her species. Duke Porridge's bubbles compressed so quickly that he briefly decreased in volume by 30%. What, hissed General Vrax, is that? This, Krixna said with forced cheerfulness, is Commander Thomas Jenkins of Earth, our impartial mediator for these proceedings. Jenkins raised his cup in a casual salute. Sup. Ambassador Quinn rippled violently. A human? Here? In a peace conference? This is an outrage. I didn't realize the Confederation had developed a sense of humor, General Vrax clicked sarcastically, though his claws remained suspiciously close to his battle cleaver. Duke Porridge simply floated backward several feet. Jenkins looked around, confused. Okay, I'm starting to get a complex here. What exactly is everyone's problem? The problem, Ambassador Quinn gurgled, is that inviting a human to peace talks is like bringing a supernova to a candle-lighting ceremony. Indeed, General Vrax agreed, momentarily united with his enemy by shared horror. Your species is legendary for its unpredictability. Jenkins frowned. Lady, I gotta tell you, until 3 weeks ago we thought we were alone in the universe. How exactly did we develop this reputation? A tense silence fell over the chamber. Finally, Duke Porridge's bubbles rearranged themselves into what passed for a diplomatic smile. Perhaps, he suggested, we should begin with the traditional exchange of cultural information. Since our human mediator seems unaware of certain galactic realities. Crixna seized on this suggestion. An excellent idea. Let us proceed to the introductory banquet, where we can become better acquainted. As they moved toward the adjoining banquet hall, Jenkins leaned close to Crixna. Seriously, what's going on? These folks are acting like I'm going to eat them or something. Crixna's skin turned a pale lavender. Well, actually, there is that incident in the Galactic database about humans and their barbecues. Barbecues? What do Jenkins stop short? Wait, you don't think we eat sentient species, do you? Of course not, Crixna said quickly, too quickly, though there is some debate about your classification of sentient. Jenkins groaned. This is going to be a long conference. The banquet hall was set with an array of nutritional options suitable for all metabolisms present. General Vrax crunched on crystallized minerals. Ambassador Quinn absorbed nutrient mist through her semi-permeable membrane. Duke Porridge elaborately siphoned something fizzy into his uppermost bubbles. Jenkins stared at his plate, which contained what appeared to be moving purple cubes. Is this supposed to be alive? He asked. Of course not, Crixna assured him. It's synthesized protein structures programmed to maximize surface area during consumption. Very efficient. Jenkins poked one cube, and it squealed. Right, he said, pushing the plate away. I'm suddenly not hungry. General Vrax's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Does the human find our fare unsuitable? Perhaps it prefers something still struggling. Actually, Jenkins replied with a sudden grin. I was just thinking how familiar this all is. Reminds me of diplomatic dinners back home. Everyone pretending to enjoy the food while secretly plotting how to stab each other in the back. A shocked silence fell over the table. How refreshingly direct, Duke Porridge commented, his bubbles darkening with interest. See, where I come from, Jenkins continued. Leaning back in his chair, we figure if you're going to sit down with someone you hate, you might as well be honest about it. You too. He pointed between General Vrax and Ambassador Quinn, have been fighting so long you've forgotten why. But you're still here, which means some part of you wants this to end. Ambassador Quinn solidified indignantly. The Crestonians remember every atrocity committed by the chitinous monsters. And the Durax Hive remembers every treacherous act of the formless ones. General Vrax countered. Great, Jenkins said cheerfully. So you both have excellent memories. Now let's see if you have any imagination. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've got two choices. Figure out how to share a galaxy, or become extinct trying to own it all. He picked up one of the purple cubes and popped it in his mouth. It made a pitiful noise before he swallowed. Not bad, he remarked to the stunned table. Tastes like chicken. By the third day of the peace conference, Crixna was beginning to question her life choices. Specifically, the choice to bring a human into a delicate diplomatic situation instead of, say, throwing herself into the nearest black hole. The formal negotiations had devolved into thinly veiled insult exchanges. General Vrax had threatened ritual disembowelment 7 times. Ambassador Quinn had twice dissolved into a puddle of rage, requiring emergency rehydration. Duke Porridge had developed a nervous bubble popping tic that echoed through the chamber at irregular intervals. And Commander Jenkins? He was currently balancing a stylus on his nose while the representatives argued. The Omega Sector is rightfully Crestonian territory. Ambassador Quinn insisted, her form rippling aggressively. Our people have cultivated the nebula gardens there for generations. Nebula gardens that grow on Dirac mining platforms. General Vrax countered, his mandibles clicking furiously. Platforms built with resources extracted from our moons. The moons you illegally occupied after the Treaty of Xandar. The treaty your infiltrators sabotaged. Pop. Duke Porridge nervously burst another bubble. Jenkins finally removed the stylus from his nose and stood up. Okay, I've heard enough. All eyes compound, gelatinous, and bubble-based turned to him. You know what your problem is? Jenkins said, pacing around the table. You're both so busy being right that you've forgotten how to be smart. General Vrax's antennae twitched dangerously. The human dares question our intelligence? Not questioning it, just wondering where you're hiding it. Jenkins leaned against the table. Let me break this down in human terms. You're fighting over rocks in space. Meanwhile, there's a whole galaxy out there full of rocks. Really nice rocks. Rocks nobody's fighting over. Ambassador Quinn solidified with indignation. The territories in question are sacred ancestral holdings. Sacred because people died for them, or sacred because they're actually valuable? Jenkins countered. Because, from what I can tell, you've both spent 3 centuries and countless lives fighting over real estate that's now so bombed out and polluted from warfare that nobody can actually use it. The chamber fell silent except for the soft pop of one of Duke Porridge's nervous bubbles. The human has a point, the Duke ventured cautiously. General Vrax slammed a claw on the table. The Diracs do not abandon their objectives. We will fight until... That's when the ceiling exploded. Debris rained down as 6 figures in environmental suits crashed into the chamber on jetpacks. Before anyone could react, they deployed weapons not standard blasters, but something far more sinister. Molecular destabilizers. Crixna shouted in horror. Everyone take cover. The assassins fired indiscriminately. A beam narrowly missed Ambassador Quinn, hitting the wall behind her and instantly reducing it to its component atoms. Duke Porridge squealed as another beam passed through his lower bubbles, temporarily dispersing them. General Vrax had already drawn his ceremonial battle cleaver and was attempting to deflect shots, his exoskeleton providing some protection. The security forces were scrambling to respond, but the attack had caught everyone by surprise. Everyone except Jenkins. With a speed that seemed impossible for his species, the human vaulted over the conference table, grabbed a decorative plasma sculpture, and hurled it at the nearest attacker. The sculpture, the same one he'd been warned, could vaporize carbon-based life shattered against the assassin's helmet, short-circuiting their systems in a shower of sparks. Crixna, Jenkins shouted. Emergency protocols. Shaking off her shock, Crixna slapped the emergency panel. Gravity in the chamber reversed instantly, a standard Confederation security measure. The unprepared assassins were thrown toward the ceiling, their jetpacks working against them. All except one, who managed to adjust and took aim directly at Ambassador Quinn. Jenkins launched himself through the zero-G environment like he'd been born in space, tackling the assassin mid-air. They grappled briefly before Jenkins did something so shocking that everyone, diplomats, security, and remaining assassins alike, froze in horror. He bit the assassin's environmental suit, ripping through the material with his teeth. The assassin panicked as their atmosphere began venting, and in the confusion, Jenkins wrestled away their molecular destabilizer and calmly shot them in the jetpack. The resulting explosion was small but effective, rendering the attacker unconscious. Within moments, security forces had contained the situation. Gravity was restored, and the surviving assassins were placed in custody. As the dust settled, everyone stared at Jenkins. He stood calmly, straightening his slightly singed uniform. "So," he said conversationally, "I'm guessing those weren't the caterers." Later, in the emergency medical bay, as various diplomats were being treated for minor injuries, General Vrax approached Jenkins with something resembling respect. "You fought adequately," the general admitted grudgingly, "for a soft-bodied species." Jenkins shrugged, wincing slightly as a medical drone treated a burn on his arm. "Just did what anyone would do." "No," Ambassador Quinn interjected, her form still quivering from the attack. "What you did was uniquely human." "Indeed," added Duke Porridge, who was having his damaged bubbles carefully reinflated. "The way you used your mouth parts as a weapon. Most disturbing." "That?" Jenkins looked confused. I needed to disable him quickly, and my hands were occupied. "Seemed logical." Krixna, who had been conferring with security, joined the group. The assassins were mercenaries, hired by someone who wanted these peace talks to fail. "Well, they sure succeeded in bringing us together," Jenkins remarked dryly. "Nothing like shared trauma to build bridges." "There is something I don't understand," Ambassador Quinn said, studying Jenkins curiously. "You moved without hesitation toward danger. You used your body as a shield. You risked death." "That's kind of our thing," Jenkins replied. "Humans are pretty good at running toward trouble." "But why?" General Vrax demanded. "What strategic advantage does self-sacrifice provide?" Jenkins thought for a moment. "Honestly, it's just instinct. See a problem, fix it. Yeah. See a threat, eliminate it. It's how we survived on Earth." "Your planet must be extraordinarily dangerous," Duke Porridge commented, bubbles quivering. "Not really. We're just really bad at risk assessment." Jenkins grinned. "Which reminds me now that someone's tried to kill us all. Maybe we can get back to this peace treaty with a little perspective?" The aliens exchanged looks. For the first time in centuries, the Crestonians and Durax found themselves in complete agreement about something. Humans were terrifying. After the assassination attempt, the peace talks moved to a secure location aboard Krixna's diplomatic vessel. Security was tightened, tensions were high, and progress was still non-existent. The humans' heroics changed nothing, General Vrax insisted, pacing the chamber. The disputed territories remained disputed. "For once, I agree with the General," Ambassador Quinn replied, her surface rippling with frustration. "Though I appreciate Commander Jenkins' intervention, it does not resolve our fundamental conflicts." Jenkins, who had been unusually quiet since the attack, suddenly stood up. "Okay, I've got an idea," he announced. "But it's not exactly in the standard diplomatic playbook." Krixna's skin turned a worried shade of gray. "Commander, perhaps we should discuss this privately first." "No time for that," Jenkins replied. "Here's the deal. You're all approaching this like it's a negotiation. It's not. It's a relationship." Duke Porridge's bubbles rearranged in confusion. "I beg your pardon?" "Where I come from, when people are stuck in a situation together, sometimes the best thing to do is get drunk." A stunned silence followed this pronouncement. "You propose we voluntarily impair our cognitive functions?" General Vrax clicked incredulously. "During peace negotiations?" "Exactly." Jenkins grinned. "Look, you've all been thinking too clearly for too long. Sometimes you need to shake things up." Krixna's tentacles twisted nervously. Commander, Confederation protocol strictly prohibits intoxication during formal proceedings. Jenkins finished for her. Yeah, I read the handbook. That's why we're going to call this an informal cultural exchange. Before anyone could object further, Jenkins produced a small flask from his uniform pocket. This, he declared, is whiskey. Human diplomatic fuel. You brought poison to peace talks. Ambassador Quinn's form rippled with alarm. It's not poison if you enjoy it, Jenkins countered. And where I come from, sharing a drink is a sign of trust. So, who's first? To everyone's surprise, Duke Porridge floated forward. The Flubovian Diplomatic Corps prides itself on cultural adaptability. I shall participate in this ritual. Jenkins poured a small amount into a cup, which Duke Porridge carefully absorbed into his uppermost bubble. There was a moment of silence. Then the Duke's entire form shuddered. Fascinating, he exclaimed, his color shifting to a pleased fuchsia. It creates the most peculiar vibrations. Curiosity piqued, General Vrax stepped forward next, followed reluctantly by Ambassador Quinn, who had to be provided with a special absorbent pad. Soon the formal diplomatic chamber had transformed into something resembling a terrestrial cocktail party. Jenkins had somehow produced additional bottles of various human spirits, explaining each one's significance in Earth diplomacy. And this, he said, pouring something clear into General Vrax's container, is what we broke out when negotiating with the Russians during the Cold War. We called it detente in a bottle. The general's mandibles clicked in what might have been a laugh. Your species deliberately poisons itself to facilitate communication? Extraordinary. Pry. Not poison, Jenkins corrected, taking a sip himself. Social lubricant. As the cultural exchange continued, something remarkable happened. The rigid formality between the delegates began to dissolve. General Vrax started explaining the intricacies of Durak's mating dances to a fascinated Duke Porridge. Ambassador Quinn, now a much more vibrant shade of blue, was demonstrating how Crystonians could form complex shapes with their malleable bodies. Crixna, who had refrained from partaking in the human beverages, watched in amazement. What is happening? She whispered to Jenkins. Standard human diplomatic strategy, he replied with a wink. Get everybody relaxed enough to say what they really think instead of what they're supposed to say. This is unprecedented, Crixna marveled. The Crystonians and Durax haven't engaged in voluntary conversation for centuries. Jenkins nodded. Yeah, turns out it's hard to hate someone after you've seen them do karaoke. As if on cue, Duke Porridge began emitting a series of melodious bubbles that apparently constituted Flubovian singing. Later, as the effects of the human beverages were beginning to fade, Jenkins guided the conversation back to the disputed territories. So here's what I don't get, he said casually. You're fighting over these 12 star systems, right? But from what I understand, neither of you can actually use them because they're too damaged from fighting. They are our ancestral claims, General Vrax insisted, though with less vehemence than before. Sure, but what good is claiming a radioactive wasteland? Jenkins pressed. What if, and I'm just spitballing here, what if you declared the whole area a memorial zone? Neither side owns it. Both sides maintain it. A reminder of what happens when war goes on too long. Ambassador Quinn, still slightly more fluid than usual, rippled thoughtfully. A joint memorial. It would require cooperative restoration efforts, Duke Porridge noted, his bubbles arranging into what passed for a contemplative expression. Exactly, Jenkins said. You work together to fix what you broke together. Meanwhile, you establish new colonies in all that empty space nobody's fighting over. General Vrax's antennae twitched. The Durax would never, he paused, considering. though I suppose joint restoration projects would allow us to maintain a presence without direct conflict. And Jenkins added casually, Earth would be happy to provide technical assistance. We've gotten pretty good at cleaning up war zones. Lots of practice. This is not entirely unreasonable, Ambassador Quinn admitted. Plus, Jenkins continued, his tone deliberately casual. It would really disappoint whoever hired those assassins if you two actually made peace. That seemed to strike a chord. If there was one thing both species shared, it was a love of spiting their enemies. Crixna watched in astonishment as the outline of an actual agreement began to form. After centuries of hatred, the prospect of annoying a common enemy combined with the lingering effects of human diplomacy was achieving what countless formal negotiations had failed to do. Later, as the delegates retired to their quarters to recover from human beverages, Crixna cornered Jenkins in the corridor. That was not diplomacy, she accused. That was manipulation. Jenkins shrugged. Same thing, just with fewer pretenses. They needed to see each other as people, not enemies. And they needed a way to cooperate without losing face. He grinned. Plus, they're both terrified of what humans might do if they don't behave. You used their fear of your species? Of course. Best card I had to play. Jenkins stretched casually. By the way, I've been meaning to ask, what exactly do these aliens think humans do that's so scary? Crixna hesitated. There are stories. Reports of humans surviving conditions that would kill any reasonable species. Consuming toxins for pleasure. Deliberately damaging their bodies for aesthetic purposes. You mean like alcohol and tattoos? Jenkins laughed. That's what has everyone so freaked out. And your history, Crixna added quietly. Your wars. Your rapid technological development. The way you went from planetary combustion engines to fusion drives in less than 2 centuries. Jenkins sobered slightly. Yeah, well, we're an impatient bunch. Which makes you perfect for this situation, Crixna admitted. Sometimes, Admiral, the right tool for peace looks remarkably like a weapon. 3 days later, in the Grand Convocation Chamber newly repaired after the assassination attempt, representatives from 17 species gathered to witness the impossible, the signing of a peace treaty between the Crystonians and Durax. The terms were unorthodox, to say the least. The disputed territories would become a jointly administered memorial and restoration zone. New colony rights would be established in previously unclaimed sectors. A cultural exchange program heavily monitored would be implemented. And most surprisingly, both species had requested ongoing human consultation for the restoration projects. As Ambassador Quinn and General Vrax formally encoded their genetic signatures into the treaty, the Confederation equivalent of signing, a ripple of disbelief ran through the assembled diplomats. I still don't understand how this happened, High Chancellor Vox muttered to Crixna. 3 centuries of warfare ended in a week because of one human? Crixna's skin rippled with amusement. It seems, Chancellor, that sometimes the most effective peace negotiator is someone both sides fear more than they fear each other. But the human didn't threaten anyone. He didn't have to, Crixna explained. His mere presence and his unsettling capabilities provided perspective. The Crystonians and Durax realized their differences were small compared to the potential threat humans might pose to the galaxy. So they made peace out of fear. Initially, perhaps. But Commander Jenkins also showed them something important, that cooperation can be more advantageous than conflict. Across the chamber, Jenkins was chatting amiably with Duke Porridge, apparently explaining something about Earth swimming competitions that had the Flubovians' bubbles practically vibrating with horror. The formal ceremony concluded, and as the delegates mingled, Crixna approached Jenkins. Commander, on behalf of the Galactic Confederation, I extend our deepest gratitude. You have accomplished the impossible." Jenkins grinned. "Just doing my job. Though I'm still not entirely sure what that job was supposed to be." "You were exactly what we needed," Krixna admitted. "It's a controlled threat. A reminder that there are more dangerous things in the universe than ancient enemies. Happy to help, though I'm not sure how I feel about being the galaxy's boogeyman." Jenkins glanced around at the still nervous delegates. Humans aren't actually that dangerous." "Perhaps not individually," Krixna agreed. "But your potential, that is what makes other species uneasy. You adapt too quickly. You take too many risks. You survive what should kill you." "Fair enough. So what happens now?" Before Krixna could respond, High Chancellor Vox approached, all 12 nostrils flaring with excitement. "Commander Jenkins, an extraordinary achievement. The Confederation would be honored if you would consider serving as a special diplomatic consultant for other, challenging situations." Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "You want to use me as a threat in other negotiations?" "Not a threat," Vox objected, then reconsidered. "Well, perhaps a deterrent, a reminder of what cooperation can achieve, and what refusing to cooperate might unleash upon the galaxy." "You want to point at me and say, 'Behave or the humans will get involved.'" Jenkins finished with an amused smile. The High Chancellor's skin flushed a deep purple. "I would phrase it more diplomatically, of course, but essentially yes." Jenkins laughed, a sound that made several nearby diplomats flinch. "Well, I suppose there are worse jobs than being the galaxy's diplomatic nuclear option." Later, as the celebration continued, Krixna found Jenkins at the observation deck, staring out at the stars. "You seem contemplative, Commander," she said, sliding up beside him. "Just thinking about perspective," he replied. "All these species, all these civilizations. Back home, we thought we were alone in the universe. Turns out we're just the scary new neighbors nobody wants to talk to." "Not scary," Krixna corrected. "Unpredictable. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Fear is a response to a known threat. What the galaxy feels toward humans is something more akin to respectful caution." Jenkins snorted. "That's a nice way of saying everyone's waiting to see if we blow ourselves up or take over the galaxy." "Perhaps," Krixna admitted. "But today you showed the Confederation something important about humans, your capacity to create peace, not just chaos. By threatening chaos. By showing alternatives. By thinking differently." Krixna's tentacles gestured toward the celebration. "Look at them. The Crystonians and Durax are actually conversing. Voluntarily. After 3 centuries of war." Jenkins nodded slowly. "I guess sometimes you need an outside perspective to realize how ridiculous your problems look." "Exactly. And that is why the Confederation needs humans. Not as weapons, but as recalibrators." Before Jenkins could respond, their conversation was interrupted by General Vrax, who approached with what appeared to be a ceremonial weapon. "Human," the general said formally, "the Durax Hive wishes to present you with this token of our respect." He extended the gleaming blade. "It is a warrior's honor, given only to those who have demonstrated exceptional survival potential." Jenkins accepted the weapon with appropriate gravity. "I'm honored, General." "The blade has been in my family for 12 generations, Vrax continued. "It has tasted the fluids of 17 species. That's disturbing but impressive." Not to be outdone, Ambassador Quinn approached, her form shimmering with formal patterns. "The Crystonian Collective also wishes to present a gift." She extended a small, pulsing orb. "This is a memory crystal containing the collective experiences of our first contact with other sentient species. We believe humans will find it educational." "Thank you," Jenkins said. accepting the gift cautiously. I'll make sure it gets to the right xenoanthropologists. As the two former enemies moved away, still carefully maintaining distance from each other, Jenkins turned back to Crixna. So this is diplomacy, huh? Get everyone drunk, scare them a little, and accept weird gifts. In essence, Crixna agreed, her skin rippling with amusement. Though I believe you have introduced several innovative variations to the standard protocol. Wait until they see what we do at the after-party, Jenkins grinned. The High Chancellor approached again, this time with an official-looking data pad. Commander, if you would consider our offer to serve as a special consultant, the Confederation would be most grateful. We have several ongoing conflicts that might benefit from the human approach. Jenkins pretended to consider this for a moment, though his mind was already made up. After all, how often did a person get the chance to represent their entire species to the galaxy? Chancellor, he said finally, I accept on one condition. Name it. In every future peace negotiation where humans are involved, the Confederation includes the following warning in the official documentation. Caution, peace talks include humans. Proceed at your own risk. The High Chancellor blinked all 6 eyes in sequence. You wish us to advertise your species as a hazard? Exactly, Jenkins said with a wink to Crixna. If everyone's going to be afraid of us anyway, we might as well use it to keep the peace. As word spread of this unusual condition, a strange phenomenon occurred throughout the chamber. The assembled diplomats representing species that had evolved on worlds light years apart all produced their own equivalent of the same reaction, nervous laughter. And thus began what would later be known as the human era of galactic diplomacy, where the mere threat of human involvement became the Confederation's most effective peacekeeping tool. After all, why continue fighting each other when there were humans out there? Just waiting for an invitation to your conflict, ready to solve your problems with their bizarre methods, terrifying biological capabilities, and completely unpredictable solutions. As Crixna later noted in her official report, sometimes the most effective path to peace isn't through harmony or understanding, but through the galaxy's shared agreement that some things like humans are just too alarming to risk unleashing. In this respect, humans may be the greatest peacekeepers the Confederation has ever discovered, not despite their chaotic nature, but because of it. Humanity had finally found its place in the galactic community. Not as conquerors, not as victims, but as the diplomatic equivalent of a controlled explosion.